fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. This is going to be a good one. Got my boy Todd Foucher, not to be confused with Todd Foucher, which I completely destroyed his last name. And offline, we were talking about that maybe he needs to get something like I have, the Simons like diamonds, for his last name, because I've known Todd for 4 years, and apparently I've been butchering his last name every single time, and he just busted me on it just a few minutes ago. So, quick backstory. I have known Todd for quite some time. He's the one of the owners and creators of Roundabout Boats. We did a video with them. It's been a couple of years now. I run into Todd at some CCA events and ICAST. Got to spend some time with him when I interviewed the main man, Marty, because Marty's boat, the Kontiki and all Marty stuff, is right there in Todd's office. So kind of tie it all in together. So Todd, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
So for those that are listening, how do you spell? I know how to pronounce your last name. How do you spell your last name? This will be a good lesson for everyone on how to pronounce someone's last name that looks like Foucher.
Completely different, yeah. Actually, the actual spelling is Foucher. So it looks like Boucher, but it's pronounced Foucher, and the R is silent because it's French. And so let's put it like this. If everybody remembers the movie Waterboy, Bobby Boucher, his last name was with a B instead of an F. So just remember Bobby Boucher, Waterboy, Todd Foucher, whatever you want to associate it with. So that's how a lot of people remember it too.
Too funny, man. Well, one big reason I wanted to get you on the show is you are a wealth of knowledge. I know you've got just a crazy past of what you've done in the fishing world. And more recently, though, you've been really active on Facebook and on YouTube doing some legit, really in-depth how-to videos, and not just how-to, because how-tos are amazing, but the only thing better than just how-to on a chalkboard is how-to on the water, right? Talking about how you go fish for this stuff and then showing it being done on the water, and even just all the small little segments that you've done, even for our group, for some of our insider members and Salt Strong members who have commented saying man, that guy Todd is super helpful, the way you dissect inshore spots. And now you're getting really big into the offshore and the grouper and snapper, which we're going to talk about a lot today. Man, just super, super helpful. So real quick, before we get into a lot of the how-to, what's the backstory in a minute or two?
Sure. Well, of course, I've been fishing Tampa Bay for 31 years. I was a full-time guide from 2004 through 2010. So I've had a lot of time on the water, and I've done a lot of different fishing. And I was well known when I was guiding back in the day for my inshore, for snook especially. But by the time I got towards the end of my career, I was doing some grouper fishing, but I was completely doing it differently than what I'm doing it now. We were actually free-lining pinfish in shallower water, and it really worked out well. But as I got back into the weekend warrior role, we kind of refined our techniques. And when we bought the new boat, we bought the equipment, because I told Chad, I said, if we're going to do this, we need the right equipment. So we bought the spot lock trolling motor, we bought the side imaging sonar, and we went to work. And right now, we have well over 600 spots between the Skyway and the Little Manatee River. So we have quite a few different waypoints and quite a few different scenarios when it comes to finding the right structure to be able to catch these fish and understanding the change of the diets and things like that. So my background is I've been fortunate enough to have the time on the water to be able to learn everything that I've learned over the 31 years. And it's just, I'm the type of person that I want to help people catch fish. I want people to go out and enjoy the time on the water, which we always do, no matter if we catch fish or not. But everybody goes fishing for a reason, and that is to go catch fish. And so that's kind of my primary hindsight, is that I want to go out and help people catch fish and have them learn new techniques. So that's kind of the position that we came in with the grouper and snapper. It just kind of rolled into a situation where it just kind of blew up, because a lot of people didn't realize that kind of fishery was within Tampa Bay, at least the type of fish that they're catching, the size of the fish. Everybody knew that there was snapper in the bay, but not 22, 23 inch snapper.
So this is going to be great. So let's talk about that old versus new, because you kind of teased on that, and in particular for grouper. So talk about what you said you were free line and pinfish back in the day, and then let's kind of evolve into what's happened now.
Okay. Well, back in the day, we primarily fished the Port Manatee shipping channel, and the fortunate part about fishing that channel is it runs cross diagonal how the tide runs through there. Instead of like the main shipping channel, it runs perpendicular with that channel. So free lining, you have to have a slow tide out in the main channel. But up at the port channel, what it does is the actual tide slows down the closer you get to the port. So what we were doing was, how I found this all out was, I was actually fishing the Port Spoil Island, coming off the island one day with the trolling motor. This was back when it was still open. And I looked down and I was in 6 feet of water, and I could see the edge of the ledge just drop straight off. Well, there was grouper and snapper right on the top of the ledge. So I came back around, set up, and started chumming like I would for snook and redfish. And these fish started blowing up on chummers. And I thought, man, this is kind of different. And all we had was really small inshore gear. And so my customers were hooking fish and they couldn't stop them. And then one of my customers, he threw out in the middle, and I said, man, you're probably just going to catch a Spanish mackerel or something. Well, he hooks about 110-pound tarpon, and we start fighting this tarpon, and we're following it. And I see all these tarpon rolling everywhere around us. And I'm like, oh my God. So I wasn't a big tarpon guy back in the day. So I called a friend and I said, hey, there's tarpon all over this place. You need to come and check this out, because he was well known for tarpon fishing. So the next day he rolls up there. He calls me up and he says, okay, I've jumped 4 tarpon. I've caught a 16-pound and an 18-pound gag. And I said, I think we're onto something. So, and he was free lining pinfish. So I went out there, I think the following day or the next day, and I literally jumped, I think it was like 15 tarpon, and I had caught a bunch of gags, just free lining pinfish. So we started refining the technique, and what we were doing was we would throw up tide and let the bait float down naturally and swim down naturally. And then we would let it work all the way to the edge of the ledge. And then we would pick it back up and throw it back out again and let it come back down. And most of the time those fish would hit, and they were on top of the ledge in shallower water, anywhere from 9 feet to 18 feet. So, and we still fish like this to this day. We did it 2 weekends ago or 3 weekends ago when it was blowing like 20 miles an hour out of the east. We were able to kind of tuck up in, and we caught our 2-man limit very quickly. And so we fished like that quite a bit back in the day, and we still do it today. And but it was something that was unique, because my clients could actually catch them, because we weren't fishing straight up and down. They were allowed to cast out, and even my 7-year-old grandson caught a 23-inch grouper free line, and he casted it out by himself, let it roll down, did it naturally, and caught it on inshore spinning gear.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's a cool fishery, especially up in that area, because you can catch them shallow. My biggest gag has actually come from fishing just like that. It was 36 inches and 26 pounds. It was a beast, and I've lost one that was bigger than that. I would estimate him probably closer to 40 inches and at least 30 pounds. He was the biggest gag I've ever seen, and this was all in 18 feet of water. So, I've always heard in the past where people talk about, well, the gag grouper, they come in and out, they migrate in and out. No, they don't. They're here all year long. There's enough structure. There's enough bait. The only thing that I feel that happens is that the bigger gags, their metabolism slows down during the summertime. When the snapper, they gear up. And I think it's a role reversal. In the winter, the gags really start getting fired up. And the snapper, I think their metabolism gears down, because what I have found recently, and we're going to cover this on our YouTube page, where snappers' diet has changed. I think that they've switched over to shrimp, because a friend of mine was out when we were out the same day, but we were targeting gags because it was right at the end of the season, and they wanted snapper. Well, they caught over 100 snapper, and a lot of them were between 18 and 22 inches long, and they caught them all on shrimp. They went through 100 or 15 dozen shrimp, and so that told me, because we were fishing at one point, we were fishing right next to each other, and so that tells me that their metabolism has changed and their diet has changed. And I think that they're because a lot of grouper too have been full of crabs. The last couple that we filleted were full of crabs. So I think that whole thing has changed, that, you know, but those fish are always there. I put down cameras, and like I always thought the snapper left in the wintertime. They don't. They're still there. They changed their diet. So that's what we're going to kind of get into, and prove that that's exactly what's happening.
And so, without like giving up your spots, are you still talking about primarily these shipping channels and places like that in the Bay, or like are you having to go offshore at all?
No, we don't go past the Skyway.
Oh wow! Dang. Okay.
The only time we ever went past the Skyway was the summer of this year, when we had all that rainfall and all of the rain from all that fresh water coming out of the rivers. What happened is it changed the salinity of the water up towards the Little Manatee River, the Alafire River, things like that. All those fish pushed way south past the Skyway. So we were finding clear water past the Skyway. But if we had fished up between the port and Little Manatee River, we were catching very little fish. But as soon as we got closer to the Skyway and past the Skyway, we did really well. But as soon as that water started clearing up again, we started moving our way back north again. But yeah, most of the time that we fish, we're fishing the main shipping channel. And it doesn't change for us. I mean, we don't go offshore. I really haven't had. The only reason why I would want to go offshore, me personally, is because I would want to go catch yellowtail or hogfish. But other than that, there's no reason for us to go offshore, because we catch big snapper. I caught my biggest snapper this year at 23 inches, and it was just over 5 pounds. And
how deep?
He was in 45 feet of water.
Okay. Yeah,
inside the bay. Yeah. Nuts, so we primarily fish the main channel and the port channel, and we do have some areas that are in shallower that we'll fish every once in a while. But yeah, there's so many spots, and like I said, we have over 600 waypoints between the Little Manatee River and the Skyway, and those are all grouper and snapper spots that we've got.
And so those aren't all obviously in channels. Some of those are just random rocks and little drop offs and stuff you guys have discovered over the years. Yeah. But majority of them, if you were to ride in my boat, you would see as we ride along the channel, it's just littered with spots. And we have found some spots that I had drove by, I don't know how many times, but we went a different direction. We went across the channel instead of down the channel. And we found some ledges out in the middle of the channel that literally were only about not even 2 feet of rise. And I've sent the camera down there, and it's absolutely loaded. But it's so hard to spot. We don't even spot it on the regular sonar. It's on the side imaging. Man, and I'm going to talk about the importance of that in a little bit. Let's keep on this same kind of course here. So in the past, you started off fishing these ledges, free lighting pinfish. What are you doing now? Like what's the main tactic for grouper in particular? You can talk about snapper too, but I want to really dive in this grouper thing. This is intriguing that you're doing this year round. This is nuts.
Yeah, the grouper, what we did was we were buying jigs online, and we were buying hundreds of jigs, 3/4 ounce, constantly. And finding a 1 ounce jig that is reasonably priced is nearly impossible. So I was talking to Chad one day. I said, you know what? I'm going to start building my own jigs. And he's like, man, you don't want to get into all that. And I said, yeah, I do. I want to build my own jigs. And just for giggles, I put it out there and said, hey, we're going to build our own jigs, 3/4 ounce and 1 ounce, and orange and chartreuse. And that's it. Well, I thought, man, if I sell a pack a week, whatever, I'm building them more for ourselves. Well, it's turned into an absolute animal. I literally have to sometimes come in on weekends just to build enough jigs to be able to fulfill orders by the end of the weekend on Monday.
Dang.
It's turned into an animal, but we're just primarily using 1 ounce and 3/4 ounce jig heads. And if the tide gets too strong, we'll go to a 3 ounce knocker rig. But we've found that once the tide starts really moving hard, via camera, and this is the reason why we know this is because we put a camera down there when the tide's ripping, and what happens is those fish are sticking to the bottom, and they're doing everything they can to stay in one spot. So they're not going to be prone to go chase a live bait. The only time we do well when the tide is really ripping hard is if we're using cut bait. And we've got a couple of techniques where if we're using the jig head still, we'll raise it up and let it go down and flutter down 3 or 4 more feet, and then we'll flip the bail, do it again and do it again until we get to a place to where we feel that we're out of the range, and we'll reel back in and do it again, throw it up in front of the boat and let it bounce its way down the bottom. But the primary tides that I like to fish when we're fishing for grouper and snapper are the slower tides. And I know inshore slow tides stink. They're horrible. I always hated a slack tide. But now that we're doing the grouper and snack, I can't wait for the slack tide to happen because we chum. And what we do is when I say we chum is that when we catch our bait, we always try to at least catch 1 bucket full of bait that we keep to chum with. Yeah. And if depending on the time of year, if it's real small, we won't cut it up. We'll just chum whole bait. And what happens is we'll be fishing on a spot, and I never. This is one key thing. I never look for fish on the bottom. I never look for a mark on a fish. I always look for the structure, and the only time we ever do mark fish is when we start chumming, and we chum on the slack tide. And what happens is you'll see the bottom rise up on the bottom machine, and it depends on where we're fishing. And the port, we can get the snapper chummed up right on the surface. I've got drone footage showing that the snapper right on the surface, and it's crazy. But then other times we can get them about halfway up, and we'll start catching some really good snapper. But then all of a sudden the grouper will push in, and they'll bully their way into the mix, and it will shut the snapper off, and then we'll start catching grouper, and then eventually we'll wear them out, and then the snapper will come back in. So that's a key thing, especially on the slow tides and the slack tides. Is we love to chum and free line. We free line a lot on those slack tides. We just do it like you do yellowtail. You put down the bait and just you feed it out by hand. And we just wait for that line to twitch and start to take off. And a lot of times it's good for us because the fish are usually way off the bottom when we're doing it. Yeah. So we can catch some really big snapper and really big grouper by free lining like that. Matter of fact, the opening day of grouper season in June, Chad actually caught 4 keepers within 10 minutes of each other, not even that, by free lining. I was cutting up bait and he was free lining. He caught 4 keepers, and we were done with our limit. But then the bite shut off at 9:30 and it didn't turn back on for the rest of the day. So what happened was we were fishing a major feeding time.
And what were you using? What were you free lining?
We were free lining cut white bait.
Okay. And so then let's go back to the jig heads. One, you got to tell everyone like your website or how they can get some, assuming you can keep up with the demand.
Yeah, it's TampaBayFishingChannel.com, and what we've done is we've got the regular jig heads. I just now produced some swing jigs, which we're gonna use for sheep's head because I've done some looking into it. So I bought some jig molds for swing jigs. And I'm going to have those from, I think a 1/8 ounce up to 1 1/4 ounce. And we're going to be able to use those two for grouper and snapper. And then we have fluorocarbon line. And then we're going to have some braided line that we have coming in.
Awesome. So when and how are you using these jig heads for the grouper? You mentioned on the complete slack tide, you're chumming, still doing some free lining. When do the jig heads come into play, and how are you maximizing them?
Yeah, anytime that there's a tidal movement, if it's slow or fast, or whatever, mainly when it's a slower tide, we're using the 3/4 and 1 ounce jig heads. And what we do typically is that, like I said, we drop it down to the very bottom and we'll let it sit there for a couple seconds. If we don't get a bite, what we'll do is we'll kind of jig it up and then we'll release the bail. Then it allows that bait to go back a little bit further in the water column and back further on the structure. And we'll work it back until we feel that we don't have the advantage where the line is more of a diagonal situation where if we did get a fish, what would happen is we would have to pull him, away from the structure, but he would be still down in the structure because we're at an angle with the line, so that fish will have more of an advantage over us in that circumstance. So that's when we kind of will switch to the knocker rig to keep that bait a little bit closer. But mainly 95% of our fishing is done with the 1 ounce and 3/4 ounce. And what we're doing is we'll hook the bait either up through the bottom through the top, or through the top down to the bottom. We usually, on the greenbacks, we'll hook the bait from the top of the nose down through the bottom of the lips. And the pinfish, we reverse it. We'll hook through the bottom of the lips up through the top of the nose. So it gives them a natural presentation still. And a lot of times I've actually caught it on camera too, to where the baits are strong enough to where they're swimming with the 1 ounce weight, and they're swimming right above the bottom. Mm. So it allows them to still kind of have a natural reaction. And it's just been a winner for us for sure, using the jig heads like that.
Have you found a certain bait that's like your confidence bait? Like, hey, if it's tough, I got to use this for grouper and snapper. There's two baits that we know that, there's three baits that, and a lot of people don't know this. I haven't really, only a couple seminars I've mentioned it. There's three baits that are almost guaranteed that you catch a grouper. One is a pigfish or a grunt, what we call it. It's not the same as a Key West grunt, but it's a pigfish. It sounds like a pig. It grunts. That is almost a guaranteed fish. Now, another one is a mahara. A mahara, and we only catch them at the Skyway, and a mahara will get eaten as fast as you can put it down there. Mm. And then the other bait, which is what we catch a lot of big grouper on, is spadefish. Huh. They absolutely hate spadefish. I mean, with a passion. We put it down there, and they are on it as fast as we can put it down there. We've always thrown them back when we catch them at the markers. We've always said, we don't need these. But Chad was like, well, let's put some in the live well. And I'm like, whatever. So we went out, he dropped one down. And as soon as it got to the bottom, I think he caught like a 32-inch gag. And we looked at each other and we're like, huh. So we started putting them down, and there were some fish that we just couldn't even stop. And so those three baits are I can almost guarantee that you're going to catch grouper on. Now, typically what we catch is pinfish and whitebait. And the funny part is that there's days that we'll go out there and we'll catch fish on every type of bait that you throw down there. And then there's days that they won't touch anything but a pinfish. And then I think it was like the last 2 or 3 weeks of grouper season this year, the only thing that we could catch fish on was cut bait. Hmm. We couldn't catch them on pinfish. We couldn't catch them on whitebait, live whitebait. So we were throwing down cut bait, and that's what we were catching our fish on. It was really weird because it changes. That's why we try to keep as much of a different variety of bait on the boat as possible, because they change so fast. I mean, you literally could be sitting in the same spot, catching fish after fish after fish on every bait, and then all of a sudden it shuts off and somebody sends down a different bait, and boom, they get bit.
And I kind of reiterate that in our videos, and I talk about, how important it is to try to have a variety of different baits that you can throw down and see which one they're going to be keyed in on, or if they're just going to eat everything that you throw down there.
Man, so cool. Let's talk about the side imaging. We recently came out with we called it the Fish Finder Mastery Course with Peter Deeks, and a big chunk of that was on the side imaging. Talk about what that's done for you and how you're using it. I thought it was interesting that you said you're never really looking for fish; you're looking for the structure, which makes sense. Talk about that and which manufacturer you like personally. I know it's not a sponsored deal or anything, but what you found has been best for you here inshore.
Okay. The side imaging has been a game changer for us, and I use the Humminbird Solix 12 is what I got. I was a Humminbird guy from back in the. I actually had one of the first side imaging devices that they came out with back in the day. I had the 998, I think it was, and then the 1198, and I loved them. I mean, it was amazing what you could see, even in the bushes. You could go down the shoreline and you can mark snook and all kinds of fish in the bushes or underneath docks. So I was a big fan of the side imaging. But when I started reading up, when we started looking for another machine, I started reading up on the Humminbird Solix and the Mega HD side imaging that they have. And so I went ahead and purchased one, and it's like watching an HD TV. If you understand, if you get used to knowing what you're looking at, it changes the whole perspective of things. I mean, now I go out and I literally look for the most trying to think the word of it. Something that's so out of the ordinary that nobody would even look at it. And we have found some unbelievable spots just by saying, hey, and when I find a spot, what I do is I'll stop and I'll have Chad send down a bait. And if he gets bit, then we sit there and we'll fish it. If he doesn't, we'll keep moving on. Yeah. But the side imaging allows you, on mine, I think it allows up to over 200 feet on each side of the boat to be able to look out on the sides of your boat. And I very rarely look at the actual sonar itself. I only look at the sonar when I want to position myself over a certain piece of structure. But that side imaging, and I've had guys get on my boat and they have their own side imaging and they see mine and they're like, mine doesn't look like this. Mine doesn't look like this. And that's been a real game changer for us simply because, it's been able to allow us to find spots. And for me, it's been a learning curve because I knew how to read it, but I didn't know the finer details of that Mega HD side scan that they have, to where it is showing things that just you would never think of stopping there to fish. And now I've realized, okay, now I've got to stop at this location and fish. And it shows the details of the rocks. It shows the sea fans. You can tell what's a rock and what's a sea fan. You can tell if there's, what kind of ledge there is and how far, like when you're going down the port channel, and if you're up in the skinny water looking down out towards the middle of the channel, you can see the relief and how far it goes up, and you can actually see the jaggedness of the actual ledge. And it's so detailed, and it really has changed the way we fish, especially for snapper and grouper. But in all honesty, if I was not doing snapper and grouper, we wouldn't own the trolling motor and we wouldn't own the side imaging, because it doesn't come into play for us inshore. I'm a big live bait guy, so the trolling motor, it wouldn't be a big thing for me. But being out there and you want to get precise on some of these spots, because some of them are very small. Some of them are maybe as big as our boat, and some of them are as long as a football field. So it's being able to adjust yourself and be able to sit in that spot and fish it correctly, where if you were anchored up and if anything was to switch, the wind or the tide or anything else like that, that boat can come off 10 feet and you're off the spot. So having those two components have been a tremendous help for us. But that Humminbird Solix, I've actually sold, I think I'm about to sell the third unit just because of the people that have come on our boat and saw the unit and realized, oh my God, this is something I have to have.
How did you get great at reading it? Was it just time on the water? Or do you watch YouTube videos or what?
Time on the water really is because everything's different. I mean, a lot of the videos that are out there are freshwater related.
Yeah, that's what we found. Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely different than what you see in the saltwater application. So, somebody's looking for trees. We're not looking for trees. We're looking for rocks and small ledges. And I found that some of the squiggly lines on my side imaging actually indicate hard bottom. So I've learned that before I'd look at it and say, well, there's nothing there. But now we'll stop. If it's something just out of the ordinary, we stop and fish it. And 9 out of 10 times we catch fish.
Man. So you touched on something that I really want to hammer is boat positioning. You've obviously got your spot lock. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes a lot of weekend warriors make, including me. You can, I mean, even you could literally have the waypoint and know where you are and still screw it up if you're not fishing it right and presenting the bait right, depending on the tide and all that stuff. So can you spend a little time talking about the importance of positioning your boat and getting your bait down, to that spot in the right way?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things that I can recommend is if there's any kind of moving tide, always go up tide of the structure. And I know that sounds redundant, but a lot of people think that you need to be anchored right over the structure. And the only time I actually put my boat over the actual structure is when the tide is slack. Because at that point we can chum, we can get the bait off the bottom right underneath the boat, and it works at that point. And what I do is when I go out and mark new spots, what I do is I'll mark the very beginning of the spot and then I mark the very end of the spot. So what it does is it allows me, like we've got a couple spots that are probably, like I said, a football field long. And what I'll do is I always start at the up tide side. And so we work our bait right into the beginning of the structure. And then once we wear that spot out, we'll move down the structure halfway. We'll work that, catch more fish, and then we'll work our way down to the end of the structure. So what you want to do is if you're out marking structure, you want to be able to mark it in two different locations. So so you're not trying to get on one waypoint. So that allows you to position your boat up tide of that structure and allows your bait to work down to the structure itself. Because if you're over the structure and the tide's moving, what happens is you let that bait down, especially with a 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce jig. What happens is and the line will move. If you're using, and that's why we use such light line, is because when you drop down, what happens is if you have that heavier leader and that heavier braided line, it creates a huge loop in your line, and you think that your bait is farther away than what it is, and it's just that loop in the line. So I use 8-pound braided line and 20-pound leader, and Chad uses 10-pound braided and 20-pound leader, and you would not believe the number of people that have gotten on our boat and they're not getting to the structure because what's happening is they're getting that huge loop in their line. They're not feeling the bait hit the bottom where we feel it hit the bottom and we can work it along that bottom. So that is why we're up tide when we have a moving tide, is because it allows us to get the bait to the bottom and work it down into the structure. Because if you're sitting over the structure and if it's a small piece of structure, and you drop down, your bait's going to go away from the structure, and that's why we don't chum when we're fishing a moving tide, because that bait will go far away from you. Matter of fact, one day I had a friend of mine that was fishing. He was maybe a 1/4 mile away from me, and I could see that they were chumming, but the tide was coming towards me, and their chum I could still see it in the water column. So you got to understand and know when to chum. And one thing that we've really found, and this was really interesting to us, is that when the tide is changing out there, what happens is the tide always changes underneath first. So the tide, let's say it's going out and you're fishing and you put your line out and all of a sudden it looks like your line is going out with the tide, but then you come tight with your line and you realize that your bait is actually closer to the boat. What's happening is that tide has already turned underneath, even though it's going out above on the top of the water column, underneath it's actually starting to come in. So that indicates to us, okay, we need to start chumming, because what will happen is that chum will go away from the boat when we dump it in the water, but it gets about halfway down to the water column and it turns around and it comes back towards us. And when it gets to the bottom, it actually is underneath the boat when it gets to us. So our bait is already coming back towards us anyway. So we know that's when we can free line like that. But that's a key thing to know when the tide is changing out there, is to watch how your line is sitting in the water when you drop down to the bottom. Because a lot of times, like I said, the tide will look like it's going one direction, but underneath it's actually going the opposite direction. So it's coming towards you. And we learned that by accident. And that has been a key proponent for us when we're out there chumming, because when you have those 4 tide days, what happens is that you don't get very much of a slack tide out there. You get that change of the tide underneath and on top, to where they're going 2 different directions. So you utilize those 2 different directions by chumming and letting that chum go away from the boat. But once it gets to mid-water column, it comes back towards you. And it's crazy how we found that out, but it definitely is a key proponent to being able to get, and that allows us to set up on the spot correctly, because sometimes we have to adjust the boat for that, because if the boat turns all the way in a different direction, the back of the boat at that point could be off the structure. So then we have to move forward and get up tied of that structure again.
That's what I was going to ask in situations. And this is awesome, by the way. You know, how far up are you going? Obviously, it's going to be based on the depth you're fishing and how fast that current's ripping through there. Do you have any, is it more just, you know, kind of looking at your line and everything, like just kind of judging it or by eyesight or what?
Yeah, it's understanding how far your jig is going. Like when the tide is ripping, it allows me to where there's sometimes where I'll have to be 100 feet off the waypoint to be able to get down to the structure where we need to be. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll sit there and we'll feed line out, because if we're not sitting directly over it and we're not close enough to it, what will happen is, of course, a lot of times you're fishing over sand, so you're not going to catch anything. But that's that technique where we raise the rod tip, jig it up, and let it go back. And then let it sit for a couple seconds, jig it up, and let it go back. And then as soon as we get a hit, we say, okay, they're this far back. So now we need to adjust the boat and go back a little bit further. So we're not as far away from the spot, and we don't have that huge angle in the water. And what we do is, in that case, is we'll get closer to the spot. And what we'll do is we'll kind of throw up in front of the boat and by the time the jig head gets to us, the jig head is on the bottom right next to the boat. And then we just work it back. And then by the time we get about 15 to 20 feet off the back of the boat, boom, we get hit. So just knowing how to make those adjustments with your boat to realize, okay, I need to be this far or I need to be closer. It's something that it's a learned technique. I could probably teach it all day long on the videos, but it's so hard to kind of explain it to where you need to make those adjustments. I'm constantly making adjustments out there, and a lot of people think that we sit in the same spot for long periods of time. I probably hit anywhere from 30 to 75 spots in a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So I gotta go back to this 8-pound braided line. All right. Cause and don't worry, listeners, I wasn't going to let that slip. Like, that's crazy. So you're catching these big gags on 8-pound test. Yes. Yeah. We're using, heavy action rods. I have a custom rod made by Chris Green, and Chad uses the red bone heavy action rods. 7'6" and 8 foot. And he, like I said, he uses the 10-pound braid. I use the 8-pound braid and 20-pound. We use 20-pound leader. Now, you can go out and catch fish on 30, 40, 50, 60, 80-pound leader. Don't get me wrong. You can do that. But what we have found is that
the bite ratio goes way, way down. And we've proven it time and time again where one person's fishing with 40, the other person's fishing with 20, and he'll catch 10 to 20 fish to my one bite. So Chad was the one that kind of started the whole light gear thing, and I kind of laughed at him at first because I was like, you're crazy, man. But then he started catching fish and catching big grouper. And, I mean, his biggest grouper that he's got up off the bottom on his light gear was 34 inches. And so I was like, this is kind of interesting. You know, it was actually last winter that we started doing this because we were just out trying to find new spots and stuff like that. And it was a challenge. So I never changed my braided or anything else like that. And we were using 20-pound leader. And yes, we lose fish? Yes, we lose fish, and it gets frustrating. But I can't tell you how many times I've had people on my boat. They get on the boat and they're like, "Oh, I've got 30-pound or I've got 40-pound," and I look at them and I say, "Okay, you can try it." And then after about an hour of watching us catch fish after fish after fish, and then barely even getting any hits, if any hits, they change, and then immediately they start getting bit. I don't know why. It's just a weird thing. I wouldn't think that these fish would be that leader shy, but they seem to be. They seem to be. I'm not going to say they are, but they seem to be. We've had more 100 fish days out there than I can count. It's been amazing. And we catch almost all of our keepers are on our light gear. We've caught, I don't know how many keepers this year. We didn't even keep track, but and I kind of reiterated earlier why we use that light gear in that light line is because it doesn't give us that bow like it does when you have heavier line, because I've watched it time and time again when some of my friends get on the boat and they have that heavy 50-pound braid and that, 40-pound leader, is they have a huge bow and they're always complaining, "Man, I can't feel the bottom. I can't feel the bottom. I can't feel the bottom." And I'm sitting there just one right after the other, and I tell them, "Come stand back here," and they stand back there and they still don't catch fish. And I walk up to where they were standing and I'm catching fish. And they've now come to the realization that, okay, this is what we need to use. And now they're going out and consistently catching fish. Yes, you will break off a lot, and it gets frustrating, especially when the bite is on and you're breaking off and you're having to retie. But I'm telling you, you're going to get more bites. You definitely will get more bites.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, you're gonna have a much better presentation. You're gonna be able to feel the fish a whole lot faster versus having that big bow. And I know a lot of guys, I mean, they're using 80-pound leader, and you can imagine what that's doing down in anywhere from 30 to 60 feet, and you got current down there. I mean, it's tough to imagine what it's doing to the actual bait and the presentation, but certainly it's going to have a big bow in it. That's crazy. I did not think you were going to say 8-pound test. So what kind of reel? What kind of reel are you using? Because I mean, so much about grouper. I mean, they hit like a freight train, and a lot of times you got a few seconds to kind of get them out from structure. What are you using?
Right now, I'm using a Boca 40, which they don't make anymore. Unfortunately, it's been a great reel for me. And then Chad is using a Daiwa Big Game 3500, and that reel has worked out well. And one thing that we've realized that when we're using the type of reels that to fish for grouper and snapper, I have my inshore reels that have the smaller handles, where you can put the handle between your thumb and index finger and reel like that. Well, that kind of reel doesn't work well out there because I literally wrap my hand around the grip of the handle and crank them in. It just makes me feel like I have more leverage. And we've gone through many different reels. We've gone through many different rods. And my custom rod from Chris Green has been awesome. Chad he likes those red bones. Unfortunately, he's broke a couple of them, but it's been more user error than anything. But yeah, the size 40 and 3500 reels in the Daiwa Big Game and the Quantum Bocas is what we use. And like I said, unfortunately, Quantum stopped making the Bocas. So if my reel ever breaks down on me, I'm probably going to switch over to the Daiwa Big Game. It seems to work really well for Chad.
And when you're talking about like the BG, like the spinning reel.
Yeah, the spinning reel. Yep.
Okay. But so you guys don't ever use like those 2 speeds and the conventionals or anything like that?
We do use conventionals every once in a while. Chad uses, we're both using pens. I think he's using a pen Fierce, I think it's called. They're both pens. Oh, Pen Rival, and I'm using a pen, I'm using something else, the different pen. But we typically, unless we're really, like when we were freelining the last 2 weekends before the grouper season closed, when we were up shallow, we had to switch to our conventional gear because we were just, and even then when we switched, we still got our butts handed to us. We couldn't stop these fish. And, it is what it is, but, we very rarely now use our conventional, very rare. It's more comfortable to use the spinning rods.
Yep.
And, everybody's like, man, we get it all the time on YouTube. Oh, if you just upped your gear, you would catch more. We may get more in the boat in the sense of the bigger fish, but at the same time, our bite ratio would go way down. I'd rather sit there and be catching fish and then all of a sudden hook a big one, get them up, or hook a big one and lose them, than just to sit there and wait. I mean, I've seen pictures of guys that have caught, 40-pound gags inside the bay, but they're using the heaviest gear. They're using the biggest pinfish that they possibly can find, and it takes them a long time to get bit. Me personally, I don't want, and Chad's the same way. We don't want to sit there and wait through all of that. We want to be able to find the action, and if we get broke off, we get broke off. But there's a lot of spots that we fish that the relief of the bottom is very low. So there's not a ton of stuff for them to break us off on. So we're able to get those big grouper up off the bottom pretty easily.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of our first mastery courses we did was with Captain Peter Deeks, who's got a handful, I think 7 world records now, including that massive, that was, I think it's the longest speckled trout ever caught. And one thing that he said that I won't forget was worry about getting the bite first before how you're going to get them in, right? Like if our goal, and you mentioned it, like is to get tight lines. Like I want to be getting strikes. When I go fishing, I don't want to be sitting there all day long to maybe get one big bite. I'd rather be getting a bunch of strikes, even if I do lose a couple of them. And I thought that was so true. And I've fished with Captain Peter Deeks many times. And the one time we're going after 50-inch redfish. I mean, that is a big bull red. Like that was the goal, is to get a 50. And he ended up getting one. And he's got his little 3000 series pin. I mean, with, 10-pound test. And like people think you're going elephant hunting and you're going to have this 6000 series. And he's like, man, now, if there's some crazy structure like fishing a dock, yes, certainly you might need to gear up a little bit, but in most cases, you don't need as much as you think you do. So speaking of that, what are some of your tips, knowing what you know now, for just grouper and snapper in general? What are some of the biggest mistakes and things that you kind of wish you knew besides the 8 to 10-pound test?
Some of the mistakes.
And I know we've kind of hit on a couple of them, but any other ones that come to mind on things that maybe you see other anglers messing up on too when they get in your boat, or like, gosh, I wish someone would tell this person that, or.
One of the biggest things that I find that people do on our boats, or if I go on somebody else's boat, is how they fight the grouper or snapper. And a lot of people, when they hook on a fish, they're like, they want to fight it like a snook or an inshore fish, and you can't do that. And you for instance, we went out on some friends' boats, and there was a guy in the boat, and he kept his drag really kind of loose, and we lock our drags all the way down. We don't have if you hear our drag come out, it's a big fish. So this guy was hooking fish, and he was fighting, and his drag was. And I looked at him. I said, every time you hear that drag go out, he's gaining line to get down to the bottom. And I said, you're going to break off. And boom, he broke off. And I said, you have to tighten your drag down. And he would tighten it down a little bit. He'd hook another fish, and his drag would start going out again. And boom, he'd get broken off. Finally, he cranked it all the way down, and that's when he started getting fish off the bottom. And, we tell people all the time is if people watch our videos, you'll see how fast Chad and I wind and pump. It's because we're trying to get that fish off the bottom as fast as possible. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make is they they kind of nonchalantly will hook the fish, and they'll just kind of sit there and want to just try to fight it and hold on and not really pull on them. And I'm like, you got to pull. You got to pull. You got to crank. You got to get that line off the bottom. I think that's the biggest thing that I see besides the leader size and the braid size is that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people do is they don't fight that fish properly. It's just because people don't realize how strong, if they've never done it before, they don't realize how strong grouper and snapper are. Even a red grouper fights stronger than a gag and a snapper all day long. And we catch 2 to 3 keeper red groupers in the bay every year. We catch a lot of small ones, but they fight very hard. And that's the thing is people don't understand that when you hook a fish, you have to get on him. You can't just sit there and you can't just try to pull on him a little bit. You have to pull and whine, get that fish off the bottom. And once you get that gag grouper about halfway up, they'll stop fighting. 90% of the time, they just kind of give up and they'll come helicoptering up to the top of the water.
Yep.
The snapper, they don't stop fighting, and neither do the red grouper. So you always want to get on them fast and try to get as much line on that reel and up in the water column as fast as you can.
Well, talk about the hook set too. Obviously, with your jig heads, you're not using circle hooks there. What are the tips in terms of as soon as you feel the bite? How are you making sure you maximize the hook set?
Yeah, the biggest thing is with us is that if we're sitting in a particular spot, especially if there's a lot of grunts and there's a lot of snapper and we're using cut bait, a lot of people don't realize that, and this gets frustrating too. But if you're using cut bait, a lot of people when they get on our boat, they'll feel the little tap 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 tap. And they want to set the hook. And we tell them, don't set the hook until you feel that steady pull. Because a snapper will snap at it and then eventually will grab it and take that steady pull. A grunt will a lot of times just sit there and peck at it. But when a grouper hits it, you'll know when a grouper hits it. It's a thump, and you need to get on them as fast as possible. Now, when we're using live bait for grouper, yeah, you definitely feel that thump. And if we're using live bait and we're in a snapper area, you'll feel that little peck, 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 peck. You got to wait for that pull. It's kind of like sheep's head fishing almost, where you feel that sheep's head pecking at it, and then if they finally pull on it, and when they pull on it, you can sit there and get that fish up. So that's the biggest thing is that sometimes you have to be patient and you have to work through the small fish. If you're catching grunts in the very beginning on cut bait, you know that you're in the right area. You're definitely in the right area, because what happens is a lot of times we'll be catching small grouper or small grunts or small snapper. We always wait them out, because what happens is those small fish will get everything going down below. They'll get a feeding frenzy going. And even if we're using the cut bait, that's what we do is we'll send cut bait down. Boom, 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 boom. They're feeding on it. And then all of a sudden, the big grouper will start to muscle their way in, and they'll push those other fish out of the way. So that's what if we're sitting on a spot and we're catching small fish, we don't leave, because we know that the big ones are sitting on the outside waiting to push their way into where the bait is. And sure enough, I can't tell you how many times that technique has worked tremendously.
So smart. Have you guys tried this anywhere else, meaning besides Tampa Bay? I mean, I have to assume anywhere there's grouper that has similar, deep cuts and old channels with probably a lot of debris and crap that's been thrown down there for many, many decades. There's probably similar setups and similar opportunities to be had.
Oh, definitely. Even though we have as many waypoints as we've got, I know for a fact that there's so many other spots. We haven't even worked our way north of the Little Manatee River. We haven't even gone north of there. So I know for a fact that I have friends that have caught keeper grouper in less than 15 feet of water between the Gandy and Howard Franklin.
Yep.
So there's grouper all over in this bay, and snapper and everything else. But I think it was funny because last year during this time, or during grouper season, if we saw 2 or 3 boats and almost all of them would be trolling, that was a lot of boats. This year, there were hundreds of boats on the channel, and I know that it's primarily, a lot of it was because of our videos and stuff like that. But as I told people on our videos, is that I'm happy to see it, because there's so many different spots that you can fish that you don't have to be on top of somebody.
Yeah.
It's different than fishing inshore. It gives you a different perspective. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that snook and redfish and trout are closed, and people wanted to go out and get some fish to eat. And this allowed them to go out and do that. So it was interesting to see the amount of boats out there, but it was also really cool to have people pull up and say, hey, Todd and Chad, thank you very much. We love your channel, and we're catching fish. And that's what it's all about, is to get people out of the water, to enjoy, to go out and catch fish. I've had fathers send me pictures of their sons catching their first groupers. And that's the big thing for me, is I just want people, and that's why we're doing a giveaway. We're doing 3 different giveaways on our YouTube page, where when we hit 8,000 subscribers, we're doing a fishing trip with Chad and I. You'll get bags of jigs, you'll get a face mask, and some other things. And then we're doing one at 9,000 and one at 10,000. It's just our way of saying thank you to our fans and our subscribers, and people that follow us and support us. And because I've met so many great people here recently, just because of the YouTube channel, and what we've done is the number of people that have come by the office, the people that I've made friends with and fished with. And so that's kind of what it's all kind of been about. And it kind of went in a direction that I had no clue it was going to go, but I'm really happy it has. And it's really fun to be able to help people go out and catch fish.
Yeah, I love it. And the channel is called Tampa Bay Fishing Channel, by the way. I'm on there on my other screen, and I'm already subscribed, so hopefully I can still be in the opportunity to maybe fish for you guys. And 7.95 thousand, almost there.
Yeah, no, we're I think this morning I looked and we were like 40,000 away, or not 40, I'm sorry, 40 away from, I saw this morning, I think.
Yep.
So we're close. We're really, really close. And Joe, anytime you can go fishing with me, that's not a problem, bud.
No, I'm pumped. I love the fact you guys are doing, the forecast is as well. I mean, you're really giving some amazing intel. And I know offline we've talked about having you being, a contributor as well to some of the things that we're doing. So I'm pumped to keep talking about that. And everyone too, check out their website. That's the TampaBayFishingChannel.com. Is that right, Todd?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
yep.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, check them out, and definitely subscribe. By the time this goes live, because we always have to pre-record these podcasts a week or so in advance, I'm willing to bet you guys will probably be at that closer to the 9,000 range. The way this is growing, and Todd's just been so helpful, and on the inshore side too. As a recovering captain, he has a ton of knowledge. And I used to love those inshore. You did those little, diagrams. I don't know what software you used, but where you had like the different colored lines and you were marking up spots, kind of like a football coach. That was so cool.
Yeah, that was actually just on paint. I was doing it on paint. And I need to get back into doing that, and because a lot of people did really enjoy that, and I need to. And that's what I think we talked about this offline, that I was going to get a little bit more educational on the inshore realm of things, because I know a lot of people still want to learn about inshore. And so I've utilized my drone in ways to where I can show a spot when I'm explaining it, so people kind of get an idea of what I'm actually talking about and what I'm actually looking at. Because if you don't get a real good feel for it, because for the inshore fishing, as you guys have done with your insider tips and your videos and stuff like that, is people need to remember that, when somebody's coming on these forums and these Facebook pages and stuff like that, and they're asking questions, some of us might think, well, that's an easy question to answer. I already know that. But that person may just start out fishing. They may have never saltwater fished before, so they're looking for direction. And that's one thing that's kind of turned me off on some of these pages, that, these people are looking for an answer for a question that they're truly wanting an answer for. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is that, and what you guys are trying to do. And I think that's why we would make a great team, is to educate these people and answer any questions that they have, because there's no stupid questions out there. Just because somebody asks a question that you may already know, that doesn't mean that this person should know it. And that's why you guys are doing what you're doing. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's because some people now, especially online, some people are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to get bashed about it. But that's what allows my YouTube page, or my Facebook page and the website, that people can come on and ask questions, because my YouTube channel gets more comments than I ever expected it to be. And so, I answer every single comment that somebody makes. I try my hardest to answer them. If I don't, I go through the comment section and I make sure that I've answered all those questions. And I think that's why a lot of people like watching the channels, because I'm interactive with them and I'll answer those questions. And we've got some videos that have over 100 comments on them, but I'm right there looking at every one of them to make sure that I answer the questions. And one of the questions we got was, can you do more cooking segments? So we've actually have a section for cooking segments that my wife does, because she's an excellent cook. And so now we've done ribeye steaks, we've done fried grouper, we've done red snapper, and then we've done a blackened grouper. We're going to do a shrimp recipe. So we're kind of branching out in different directions in that sense also. So, we listen to what people want, what people are wanting to see and wanting to watch. And so our channel is always going to be an educational channel and to help people learn. And the inshore thing is a completely different animal than the offshore thing. And, like I said to you earlier, this is my favorite time of year to fish. I love fishing in wintertime. I love the negative low tides. I've caught more 100 fish. I've had more 100 fish days in the wintertime inshore than any other time of the year. And so that's why I can go in. Matter of fact, we had a day 2 weeks ago that we caught over 130 fish.
Dang.
And Chad and I barely even fished. I think I picked up a pole 4 or 5 times, and the other 2 guys on the front of the boat, they did all the fishing. It was literally one right after the other. But we were set up in the correct spot, knew what we were looking for, and I kind of explained that on the video to where, we were looking for the big mullet schools. We were fishing a slight drop off from a flat on an open flat. And so just talking about things like that and getting into the inshore thing is what we're going to do here in the very near future, along with Sheep's Head.
That's awesome. So I got to ask here at the end, what's the ultimate goal? Do you guys have we're here now in 2020. Is there a goal with the Tampa Bay Fishing Channel in terms of a monetary goal or subscribers or an impact or what?
It's really not a monetary thing. Of course, I have my channel monetized and I do make a little bit of money from it, but it's more of getting better quality videos, more education out there, and just driving more people to go out and enjoy the water and to ask questions and to send in suggestions of what they want to see, and just kind of grow it into a community, just like Salt Strong. I mean, that's, but it's a different feel. It's a different feel in the sense of when I say community, in the sense of, like people come to you for the insider stuff, to watch the videos and everything else like that, and get the great deals and on gear and which is awesome. And mine is just more of it's hard to explain. It's just, Marty and I are talking about having a get together, but we're at our location, but we're afraid because if we do, we have a feeling that we're not going to have enough parking. And we're talking about bringing in a food truck and having seminars and just having a get together and just a kind of a fun blowout. But the unfortunate part is that we think it might be too big for our location, but we just, we want to bring people together just like you guys do. And
yeah, I love it.
And just continue to teach people the saltwater realm of fishing in Florida. And, and unfortunately I let my captain's license go because I get asked almost every single day, do I guide? And I don't. So I do throw out recommendations for guides and stuff like that. But, overall, my main goal is just to continue to grow the channel and continue to get good content out there for people that that want to learn certain types of fishing. That's where I want to go with it.
I love it. Well, we need more people like you out there educating and just encouraging and inspiring. So thanks for all that you do. I know how much work goes into every video. It's one thing to just take a GoPro out there, but you guys are doing some really phenomenal editing and multiple angles. And then of course you got to get the fish to bite on camera, which is never easy. But yeah, thank you so much. And for all of you listening, please go subscribe to his channel and come join us in the Insider Club if you're looking for something like Todd explained that's positive. We don't allow cursing or negativity or belittling because we want that safe place where anyone can ask questions. And no, it's not for newbies. We created the whole club, and I think this has caused confusion because I heard this recently. Someone was like, oh yeah, it's a place for newbies to get better. I was like, no, like the whole, and yes, obviously we help newbies, but the whole crux of this was to help weekend warriors, like guys and gals that are already catching fish and just want to catch more and have crazy busy lives, right? That have a spouse and kids and a job and just want to go out there and get tight lines every single time they fish, or at least have a better opportunity and at least have just more confidence to know what they're doing and know exactly where to go every trip. So if that sounds like you, go to saltstrong.com. You can learn a little bit more about joining our Insider Club risk-free, and definitely go check out Todd, buy some of his jigs, and certainly subscribe to the channel because that's a no-brainer. You can do it in one click. So, brother, I can't wait to talk more offline about getting you on board with some other things that we're doing and collaborating, and maybe some of these meetups too. I got a couple ideas for some places to do it because I believe you're right. Even without us involved, you and Marty would. I'm pretty sure probably. I don't know if you're going to tick off every neighbor in the mile or two range, but yeah, I can imagine it would be a lot of cars and trucks.
Yeah, Marty's got such a huge following. I mean, matter of fact, I think some guys came in this morning from Germany.
Wow.
Just to meet him.
Wow.
Yeah, we've had them from all over the world as far as Australia. So it's really neat to see his end of things because he's so different on his channel. Yep. That the guy is amazing with his hands and what he comes up with and the things that he does, but also his personality and the way he handles people he's the same Marty that you see on the YouTube channel as he is in person. And so yeah, just him alone, if we were just to put it out on his page, it would be scary of how many people would probably show up because of the amount of people that already show up as it is now. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be quite interesting if we decide to go through with this.
Love it. Well, keep up the great work. Always a pleasure chatting, and can't wait to see where this goes.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, everyone. Please go check out Tampa Bay Fishing Channel and subscribe to their channel, and we will see you on the next episode. We out.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.